Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode number 5 of TrackWrestling.com's Blue Chip Recruiting Podcast. I'll be your host, Eric Olanowski, and our guest today will be Lee Pritts, assistant coach for Arizona State University. Before we get into episode number 5, let's touch on some things going on. Since last episode with Yanni Diakmahalis, that was 2 weeks ago, we had our world team wrestled for. So the trials went on. You have Thomas Gilman, Logan Stieber, Zane Rutherford, James Green, Jordan Burroughs, Jaden Cox, Kyle Snyder, and Nick Wisdowski. That will be our team heading to France to wrestle in Paris for the World Championships. For me, I think it's great for our team that the one thing you need is experience in international wrestling. We wrestle a different style than everybody else, so wrestling our style, but having the ability to adapt to the international style is key, especially in the second period. And you can only learn that with experience. So a lot of these guys do have prior either cadet, junior, or senior level experience. So I think it's going to be one of the best teams that we've put together in some years. I know we say that pretty much every year when we head into the World Championships and run into some issues. So I just think that this is going to be one of the best teams that we have because of the experience. Last night, also from around the country, you had Sam Stoll out of Wisconsin, 3-time state champion, commit to South Dakota State, and Coach Chris Bono. He will be a projected 141-pounder, and Edinburgh's Patricio Lugo as close to coming to a deal with Iowa as possible from what we're hearing. He will be headed to Iowa. So that is what's going on around the country in the wrestling world. One thing I do want to touch on before we get into the episode is recent comments made by Thomas Gilman after the World Team Trials. As myself, I grew up in Japan, so it was especially tough hearing from him the comments that he had about Rei Higuchi. And Thomas Gilman handled it with the most class that you can. He made a mistake. He learned from that mistake. Not only did he learn from that mistake, but I can tell you that other individuals learned from his mistake. I don't think that it was meant in the way that it sounded. And the best thing for him to do with being such, prominent figure in the wrestling community is come out, address the issue at hand, and move on. And that's what he did. So props to Thomas Gilman. And that's all I have to say about that. So without further ado, let's get into our episode. All right, we'd like to welcome in this week's guest, Coach Lee Pritts, Arizona State University. Coach, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Eric.
Long time. I know. I just want to thank you up front. You've always been, if I ever need anything from you, there's one person in the wrestling world I can count on, and that's you. So thank you very much for always being there.
Well, I appreciate it, man. I do. That means a lot to me.
Yeah, well, let's jump to one thing I'm curious. We'll start off here is the Cuba trip.
Oh, yeah.
Were you a part of the Cuba trip?
I was. We were out there for 11 days. It was awesome.
So that's one of my dreams is my dad and I, we always talk about heading over to Cuba. And I know sad to see, but today President Trump said he's going to, not to get too much into politics, but he's going to, take away whatever Obama did. So you guys, perfect timing on your part. How did that Cuba trip come about?
Well, Aslan Garcia, who's our volunteer, and he's 3-time Olympian for Canada. He's been in Canada. His parents and everyone are out there. He's been out there for years, but he's Cuban. And so he started, and he goes down quite a bit, trains there, and he called them up and started working it out months ago, heck, probably 6, 8, 10 months in advance. And, and then as we got closer and it started coming together, and we went down there and stayed in Havana and trained with the Cuban national team. And there were some senior level guys, some junior level guys. It was good. There's a lot of, there's Olympic champions and world champions running around the room. So it was cool.
And you hear a lot about the facilities. They're not the best over there. For your guys, did they come back with a different appreciation of what you guys have to offer at Arizona State?
Well, I think it's I was kind of joking with some of them, and a lot of people since I've been back, and a lot of people have asked me about it. I said, when you watch them wrestle, you can see how physically strong and how just the kind of power they have, right? And I said their entire weight room we pulled out of a 3-foot closet. And people were like, "Come on!" I'm like, "I'm not kidding." I'm like, we were getting ready to lift one day during practice, and the coach was like, "Coach, come over," and waved me over, and we started pulling weights out of a 3-foot closet to take in the back, and so it's we have all the technology, and you go to some of these facilities, and what we all have here, we take kind of for granted. But that's the great thing about the trip there is that it still goes back to, I don't care how much science and technology we have, it goes back to work, So they may not have a lot, but they're willing to put in the work, and they have a lot of grit. So it was good for them to see that part of it. The wrestling room, well, it's all connected. The wrestling room is on an old basketball gym floor, and there's 4 mats that run right down the center, and it's the freestyle mat, so you have the canvas over the top, and there's birds flying around, broken windows, but I'll tell you what, it's awesome. I call it an indoor-outdoor facility because of the way it is, and there's a roof over your head, but you're in the outside breeze, and it's a really cool environment.
And year in and year out, they still put I look at Cubans as some of the greatest athletes on the planet. So that's not, they're doing a lot with not a lot. So,
well, when you think about it too, think about, think about all the nutrition plans we have, right? And and then all these supplement companies are out there, and we're all super scientific, and don't get me wrong, I believe in it and love it, but some of them are they're looking at what their next meal, not what their next meal is, but where it's coming from, so, and look at the success they have. So, there's a lot of it, and, we go over 2 weeks early for a lot of these tournaments and get acclimated. They go in the day before because they don't have the money to go over for 2 weeks and get acclimated to it. So it's half of it's the environment they train in. They have that grit. So and those are the things I learned when I was over there was, wow, they're a gritty guy, they're a gritty group of guys that, and they fight. They don't get $1 million. They don't get $100,000 when they come home from winning tournaments. So it's a different mindset. They're doing it for the love, so it's refreshing. It was incredible to be down there. I enjoyed every second of it.
That's great for your kids to see. Is this going to be a yearly trip that you guys do, or was this a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity?
The NCAA only allows you to take a foreign tour once every 4 years. So obviously there's other ways to travel overseas, but it would have to be something, that individuals kind of get invited to through USA Wrestling and different tours with USA Wrestling. So, as far as an ASU trip, I believe until they change a rule, we're not going to be able to do it until another 4 years.
And I know Michigan football, they said Michigan football is ruining it for not only football schools, but for NCAA. And there was a lot of backlash from fans when Michigan went to Rome. Was there any backlash that you guys saw from, kind of jealousy more than backlash?
No, what was cool is Ohio State had three guys come out with us, and they met us, I don't know, call it halfway through the trip, and they came out and trained. So it was great. And I know there was talks. We all worked. I'd like to think we do. I know there was talks before, obviously, the change with Kevin Dresser going to Iowa State. I know we were talking to them as well or Zeke, and I should say Zeke was and Dresser were talking, saying, hey, let's get a few of the Virginia Tech guys to go out too. So yeah, we were wide open to as many as they could handle, and even though it was started through us, I know Zeke was wide open about anybody that wants to come that can come would be great. So I don't think that we felt it from that side, or any jealousy. I just think it was, maybe some people want to do it, but I don't know if it's jealous. Like, man, that'd be really cool,
Yeah, and this show's all about recruiting, and I just thinking if you're being recruited by, a couple of schools and Arizona State calls you, and I mean, have you received any calls and questions regarding the trip? If you're from a recruiting standpoint, recruits looking at it saying, hey, the questions I just asked, is this going to be a one-year trip or?
Not really, and and I can't speak for the other coaches. I've had some of the guys that we're talking to ask me, how was the trip, and but a lot of these guys are. It's times are changing to where a lot of these guys, younger and younger, are traveling overseas and competing overseas, or maybe we didn't have that, So for us to be able to do something like that, and when I'm saying us, I'm talking our era, and your era is you were either going into your senior level, you're on the senior level competing, or one of the very few, the 8 junior world team members or something like that. It was very, very rare to have someone go overseas and train and compete. And I think now it's happening more and more. So most of the, and I can't say most, but a lot of these high level guys, it's already second nature for them, so it's just another trip for them. Like it's for remember when you were in Virginia and ooh, I'm going to go to Fargo. Like that was a big deal, yeah. Now these I'm going to Russia again, So I just think the times are changing, and I don't think it's as big of an, they're not awed by it as much anymore.
And speaking of the high level recruits, I mean, looking back a couple of years, you guys had that, it was one of the top 3 recruiting classes. I mean, I looked at it as the number 1 recruiting class.
Yeah.
Well, how difficult is it to land a blue chip recruit? Because you guys had, I mean, a couple of them with the Valencia brothers, Lance. I mean, you guys had some guys that were some blue chip recruits. How difficult is it to get one of those guys?
How difficult? I don't know. It's how difficult is it to get anybody. I mean, when people are wanted, it doesn't matter if it's in business or recruiting, and however it's building relationships. I'm a big believer in that. It's building relationships. And so is it difficult? Absolutely. Because, everyone's coming after him. Penn State's going after him, and Iowa's going after him, and Oklahoma State's going after him, Cornell, Minnesota, everyone's going after these guys, and it's like, so, yeah, the competition's high. But if your goals match up with what we can provide, then I don't think it's very hard at all. And that's the thing is you don't know what that is until you start building the relationship. So how hard is it? I don't know that it's hard. It just takes time with the relationship to see if, your academic goals match up with what we have. And if your weight class is going to match up with our needs. And if your financial situation matches up with our financial situation, we have to make it a win-win-win for everybody, right? And that's all it is sometimes it's a perfect situation, except for weight class needs. So we can't end up spending the money on a kid. Kid wants to be with us. We want him, but we can't spend the money on him because we already have 3 guys maybe at the weight class that, and then we'd be overspending, right? So you got to look at the big picture. So, it's putting people in the right spots to build your team to make a run. And so I think that's probably the bigger challenge is guessing the weight classes.
And how difficult is it that season after? You just mentioned giving all the money away to these guys. If you have the money, they're going to be looking for big money if they're the big guys. So how difficult is it that next season to recruit?
You mean after they have success?
Yeah, I mean, you come in and you have three guys like that, and the one thing my dad always told me is never count another man's money, and that's nowadays it's people, everyone's worried about Penn State. How are they getting all these guys? What are they getting? I never look at it that way because you don't know. I mean, you don't know someone's family situation. If they don't have any money, I'm sure that they're getting help elsewhere. Then you got academic scholarships and all that. So next year,
I'm going to use that. Don't count another man's money. That's good. I'm going to use that. Tell your dad I said thank you. I might call him myself and thank him.
Yes, sir.
But it is. You got to take care of the guys inside your room first. And I shouldn't say that. I don't know how other programs run. We believe in taking care of our guys inside our program first. And if we can find ways to do that, we do it. The difficult part is all of a sudden you have a gaping hole and you got a guy inside, then it gets a little difficult. That's the hard part in the business side. And, I always kind of joke a little bit and I'm like, that's head coach stuff, or Ezekiel come up to us. I'm like, talking to the assistant coaches and like, hey, what do you think here and here? I'm like, I don't know, man. That's head coach stuff. And obviously we sit around and talk about it a little bit and help out. But at the end of the day, he's got to make the decision. And, and again, we're all in it together. But I mean, that's where, you hear about, the head coaches, we can joke. That's why you make the big bucks, is you have to make those decisions. But again, we all communicate. And it is difficult. It is difficult because if we had it, we'd like to give everybody $1 million, call it a day, and walk, and be done. But that's not the reality of it. So yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult.
And another thing that must be difficult at Arizona State has to be, you guys are basically living a vacation life with the weather that you have around. It's beautiful. I mean, you see parties going on, when people talk about Arizona State, it's all frat pool parties and all that. And you guys are having success, top 15 finish, conference champions. What is your message to your guys to keep them focused when all this is going on? Because it has to be one of the most difficult jobs in college wrestling, is a coach at Arizona State keeping those guys away from all that.
No, it's not. It's how you recruit, right? You recruit guys that are driven and have high, big goals. So, and I think everybody's trying to do the same. And I was very concerned when I was coming there coming to ASU 5 years ago. That was the first thing. I was like, oh my God, how are we going to deal with this party school? But in all reality, we haven't even been top 20 party school. We haven't been on the top 20 list since 2011. And so that number one is, kind of a big misconception. Now, is there pool parties? Yes, as opposed to everyone wearing winter clothes and having a party. So when people tailgate at ASU, they get to tailgate in bathing suits. When they tailgate at Michigan State, they tailgate in parkas. But so I don't think it's different anywhere. I've coached at 4 universities, and I wrestled at 2 different universities, and they were all party schools. So what's the common theme? I'm guessing that every college campus is a party school. So now you look at the kids, who's partying and who's not partying. And if you're recruiting the guys that are focused and determined and disciplined to get the job done, then, it's not a problem for them to just, it's not hard for them. You see one of your guys starting to get distracted. What do? You remind them of their goals and snap them right back into shape. But that doesn't change at ASU or Missouri or Old Dominion or North Carolina State, any of the schools I've been at. You have guys start to lose focus of their goals, because whether there's academic issues or social issues or family problems or whatever it is, and sometimes you got to snap them back in. And again, I don't think that changes anywhere.
And you spoke about recruiting high-level kids, but kids who have high goals. When you're starting the recruiting process, a big part of life now is social media. From a coach's standpoint, how important is that? Because sometimes you see some of the stuff that kids put on and you say, it can't be true. They didn't really put this online for everybody to see. How important is social media?
It's big. I do it a little bit. I'm not great at it. I'll be the first to admit that. I'm not great at it. That's not my cup of tea. I do dabble in it a little bit, but Pendleton's our guy. He's our social media guy, and he gets him on the Twitter and the Snapchat, Instagram, and there's probably 10 other ones that they have out there that I'm not even aware of that he's on top of it, and he's good with it though. He'll come in like, oh God, did you see so and so put this on there? And we're like, oh, we'll call him up like, what are you thinking? He's like, what, is that bad? Okay, delete. So, it's a lot of times, I don't know, kids are kids and people make mistakes and you grow and learn from it. But yeah, it's something that's real. You have to educate guys and you go back and go, okay, not the world you and I grew up in, but, I'm sure there was times that we did things wrong and we didn't have it on video, and we certainly didn't. If someone had a picture of it, we put it in a shoebox or something somewhere. We didn't post it on Instagram for the whole world to see it, And you bring it out when you're 40 years old and you go, hey, check this out. Remember how stupid we were? So, but now everyone's living their life on social media in front of everybody. So you got to educate them, and they have to realize that one mistake on social media can change the course of their life. They really can. And, my son's, he's 11 years old right now, and he's on Instagram, or I think it's Instagram, and, his name's like Beast Mode or something, and I'm like, you're 11, there's a whole lot of beast in you, but he's posting stuff on there every time. He's like, hey, be careful, be careful, so it's constantly educating these guys. It's just a new day and age.
And you spoke about a shoebox before we jumped on this call. I cleaned out my garage and I found an old shoebox full of pictures of high school friends. So I started shooting them over the pictures. It's hilarious.
Right. Now they're going to be on social media, and you just ruined everything.
Yeah. Back in the day, I know that, like, my dad always said, if you want to go somewhere, shoot somebody a letter. Let them know that you're interested. Do kids do that anymore? Do they send you guys letters?
No, there's not a whole lot of snail mail going on as much.
Snail mail.
It's electronic. Everything's electronic. We get text messages and emails, and so yeah, there's a lot of interest that people are being proactive. Absolutely. I can tell you most of your blue chippers aren't as proactive, but how many is that? That, the blue chippers aren't as big. But on the other side of it, which I would call the majority of everyone else's team, our team, everyone's team, the majority on your team are not blue chippers, right? If you have a third of your team that are blue chippers, you're really happy, right? So the rest of us are the workers, and so, yeah, I think there's a lot of guys that are proactive, and I get probably 10 emails a week from people saying, hey, I'm interested, and you got to turn those rocks over to see if they fit in the ballpark of talent or what your room's looking for. But no, I'm out doing clinics and camps all the time, and I'm telling people you have to be proactive. There's how many wrestlers in this country, and we can't find them all. We want to, but we can't. It's impossible. So you have to be proactive. And if there's a school you want to go to, you have to reach out and call the coach, email the coach, have your coach call the coach, find a way to communicate and just say, hey, check me out. I'm interested. Look at my film. Tell me if we can keep talking. So my message to every high school wrestler is be proactive.
So my next question was do's and don'ts. I'll take the don't, or be proactive as your do. What's a don't for kids that you have?
I don't have too many don'ts. When it comes down to, I think in anything, it's like, hey, people are going to do what they want to do. So there's not a whole lot of don'ts. If, you got kids, you tell them don't when they're young. And as they start to grow up, you're hoping you don't have to keep sending the same message, right? So, don't touch a hot stove. If they keep touching the hot stove by the time they're, when they're 12, 13, they're touching a hot stove, that's a problem. So if we're having to tell the don'ts, chances are we're not going to be able to, they're probably not going to fit into our program anyway, right? Don't post you drinking beers on social media, right?
Yeah.
If that's, I'm not sure we can fix that, So I'm not real big into the don'ts. It's more on the do's. Hey, let's figure out what we can do to keep growing and progressing as individuals.
All right, I'm going to leave you with this, Coach. You're known as, one of the top coaches in the country. You're known as a great recruiter. After wrestling, are you going to get into coaching MMA? Because looking at your resume of guys that you have coached that have went on to win world titles, you have Michael Chandler, you have T. Wood, you have Ben Askren. I'm guessing Ed Root's going to get there sooner or later. Are you interested in coaching MMA?
No, I don't know anything about that game.
That's a joke, I know.
Yeah, hey, I'll tell you what, that's where the money is. I'd do it. I just don't know anything about it,
What is the coincidence? How crazy is it that you coached all those guys? You've had some impact on their life, I could tell you that. But, how cool is it to say that you've coached 3 world champions up to this point?
Well, it's cool. It is cool. And I stay in contact with those guys from time to time. And it's awesome to see their journey and what they've done and how they transitioned. And they've all taken different paths. They really have. They've all taken different paths. But I don't know. They were always, all 3 of those guys are driven people, right? You knew that whatever they chose to do in life, they're going to be successful. Whatever path they went down, they're going to be successful. And they just happened to choose it by getting into a cage and beating people up. And, they get out of the cage and they're back to being family. All 3 of them are married and 2 of the 3 have kids and, they're family men. So they're just great people and they go make their paycheck by, beating some people up. As crazy as that sounds, but they're incredible people.
Well, Coach Lee Pritts, I just want to thank you very much for joining me. Like I said, for everybody here at Track Wrestling, I can't tell you how much I appreciated it. It's been a pleasure, as always. This has been episode number 5 of the Blue Chip Recruiting Podcast on TrackWrestling.com. Make sure you go follow Lee Pritts on Twitter at Lee Pritts with 2 T's. Also, ASU Wrestling. You can follow them on all social media sites. Coach, thank you very much for joining me on episode number 5.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate it, and keep doing what you're doing, man. You're making the sport better.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thanks, Tud.
This show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MattTalkOnline.com.